Hey all, welcome to another interview. I have with me today for the second time, Grace Ji-sun Kim. Grace, welcome.
Thank you so much. It's great to be back.
Yeah.
Especially after the first one, you never know. So thank you for having me back.
Yeah, exactly. This is a good endorsement when you get asked back. That's always a good
Yes.
sign. Uh,
Sorry to make you get up so early, but it's only 2 o'clock here.
for you, it is more than worth it. So that's
Oh,
great.
you are too kind.
Flattery will get you
Thank
everywhere.
you.
So, for those who didn't see our first interview, Grace is the Associate Professor of Theology at Earlham School of Religion. She's the author and editor of over 10 books, including Making Peace with the Earth, Action and Advocacy for Climate Justice, The Holy Spirit, Chi and the Other, and the book we talked about last time, Embracing the Other, The Transformative Spirit of Love, and a couple of other projects that we'll be talking about through today's interview. You can also find her work all over the internet, and often it's found even easier at gracejisunkim.wordpress.com. So that's a bit about your work. Yes, but we're here today to talk about the Duke Summer Institute for Reconciliation, which we're doing a whole series on now. So what are you most excited about being a part of that Summer Institute? And what have you been experienced talking at Duke in the past?
Yeah. So I spoke there last summer, and it was very, very exciting. I think there aren't that many institutes that really deal with reconciliation, and I think we need more. Anything with justice, peace, and reconciliation is something that we, as particularly Christians, need to be more engaged in. So I'm really excited about Duke. Center for Reconciliation. They do a lot of programs throughout the year, and then this is just one of the programs that they hold and initiate. So this is held over the summer, and they've been doing it for many, many years. And they invite people like me and other, some activists, but mostly academics, to do a whole week-long summer institute talking about reconciliation. So there'll be about 3 or 4 plenary speakers. That's going to be me, and then like teaching people. So they'll be teaching throughout the week, and there's various activities. So it's a really, really good time for students, for ministers, for activists, or those who are just interested in the topic of reconciliation and how we can do the work of reconciliation. It's a great, great opportunity for people to come and learn from one another and to connect with one another. So it's usually a lot of Americans who come, but other people from around the world actually do come for the summer week-long program. So it's very, very exciting. So I'm just very excited about doing it again. Very honored to be invited, and just as I'm honored to be invited to speak in your program, it's always good to speak there, because I think we just have to have this continuous conversation on how we do reconciliation and how we continue the work of reconciliation. So many of the participants that actually come are those who are actually engaged in some form of reconciliation work or ministry.
That's great. Yeah, from what we've been talking so far with the different contributors, it's looking like a fantastic week. It's June 5 to 9, so you can just search Duke Summer Institute if you want to find out more about that. But so coming to you and the work of reconciliation, do you know what first elicited your interest into working or writing in that field? And can you identify any significant changes in the field since you first entered it?
I don't know if I can identify the first time when I was interested in it. I think it's just kind of an overlap of all my interests. I think a lot of things are not just purely one kind of discipline, or you really can't separate these disciplines. As a theologian, we want to separate ourselves from church history or Bible, but I think there is this connectedness, intersectionality. So this work of reconciliation, it is a work that intersects with work on gender justice, climate justice, racial justice. So it's just all of those work. And that's what my interest has been for over 20 years, from when I was a student, an MDiv student, to when I was doing my doctoral work, to when I'm just teaching right now. So it is very important work. I think we need more writing, more talks, more meetings like this in this area, because I just, we think about the world and we just can't get along. We can't seem to be able to communicate. We can't seem to be able to honor one another or love one another. So this is a very, very difficult thing. So, we need to kind of work through what is the problem. How can we work towards this? Because when we think about the ministry of Jesus, he was trying to, his work was reconciling us to God and then reconciling us to one another. And so this is an ongoing thing for me. And I hope to continue to do this work in any, part of my writing and part of my speaking and just part of my teaching too. So.
Yeah, great. That's really helpful to know. So I'm interested in getting some thoughts from you around the area of racial reconciliation, which seems very prescient at the moment. This is an area where the validity of the concept of reconciliation sometimes get called into question. Reconciliation efforts are sometimes accused of covering over past harms and their present effects, or ignoring the ongoing legacy of structural injustice. Like, even the term reconciliation sometimes comes under fire for the inbuilt assumption that there was a time when we were conciled, that we can get back to. I know this is the case often with Indigenous Australians or other Indigenous cultures when reconciliation efforts take place, that there was no pre-lapse time when relations were good. What are your thoughts on these critiques, and what resources do you think are available to Christians to ensure that the reconciliation we pursue is not shallow or hasty?
Yeah, that's a very good question, very important question for all of us to continually think about. I think because I'm in the American context and you are living in Australia, I think we really need to understand our history and our context. I grew up in Canada, so Canadians have a slightly different context from Americans here in the US. So I think understanding the damage and the pain and the hurt and just it's a horrible history when we think about American history. It was built on genocide of the Native Americans. We have killed so many Native Americans, and we have robbed them of their history, their culture, their religion, their land. I think there needs to be an understanding of what we have done wrong as settlers, and then the whole slavery history of America. This is a horrific past. It's not just the United States that have this slavery history. A lot of other countries, Brazil, lots in other parts of the world have this slavery history. So understanding that part of the history, and then also understanding the Mexican border history, what happened with that border, a lot of war, a lot of killing, and then with the immigrants, how the immigrants have started to come either from Asia or from other parts of the world. How do we then try to build upon this kind of awful history? When we think about the immigrants that came, particularly the Asian immigrants, so that will be my own background, it wasn't this glorious life. It was also a very horrible life that they lived. They came as indentured workers, which is not far from slavery, and the fact that they could not move around on their own. They weren't free to leave the work. They didn't make enough money to actually travel back home to China and Japan and Korea, when most people just wanted to come for a few years to make enough money to go back. So there were all these limitations set on them. They couldn't marry someone who they wanted to get married to. They had to get all this permission. So there was a lot of constraint. So many people died working as indentured workers. So this is a past that is from a couple hundred to very recent, kind of in our 19th century, 20th century history, that we really have to understand this horrible context and how then, where are we going to go from there? I think the acknowledgement needs to happen because, some of it doesn't get taught in our school. Some of it, the churches don't even recognize. It's very difficult for even some of the denominations to recognize the damage that we did to Native Americans here. So there needs to be all these steps taken, and trying to understand what is our role as Christians then. How then do we reconcile with our past? How do we reconcile with the people today so that we can make things right? And there's a lot of work to be done. The slavery might have ended, but then there is a whole prison industrial complex going on. We've got the whole Dakota pipeline happening right now. And now with the Trump presidency. He just signed something today that he's letting them go, continue with the pipeline. So there's a lot of these things that still we're not kind of dealing with. And so there's continuous damage, continuous pain. I don't know, there's just so much work to be done, and it's just painful to see this happening. 2017, now with the new presidency, you know, he just started, it's been a few days, but we don't know what will happen. So I think there's a lot of work to be done. There is a lot of mobilization. I think with the Women's March, that was a big event, a global event. So there is this understanding that, you know, we got to do something about the past. We can't continue on like this.
Yeah, no, that's a really good lesson to be saying. Like, you know, to remember back and remember rightly is very important. And yeah, the Trump thing, just because another thing I saw today was I think he put a ban out on the EPA from reporting directly to social media or journalists their findings. So that's going to be very interesting in the world of climate justice, which I know is also a...
Yeah, I'm worried about the climate justice issue. You know, we need to be reconciled with one another and also with the earth. You know, this place that we inhabit, it's just one planet. And this is the only place where we can survive as human beings. This is God's creation. But we have done so much damage to the earth. And we just think, you know, so what? It's going to replenish itself. It's not our fault. There's so many climate deniers right now. Like, I was just talking to my daughter yesterday. Here where I live in Pennsylvania, we've had a huge kind of rainstorm yesterday. And I said, this is crazy because it should be snowing. Every winter, there's so many snow days that the kids don't go to school. This year, there were hardly any because it's just milder. We are recognizing it's getting milder and milder. It shouldn't be pouring rain like this in January, but it's not cold enough to snow. So this is really happening, and we can't deny it. 99% of the scientists have already said that we are the cause of this. So we really need to do something about this. So, you know, it's reconciliation with the earth too. How are we going to reconcile ourselves with the earth, which we are participating in damaging? So this is a whole nother issue on, you know, which you probably need a whole day to talk about.
Yeah. Well, while we were there, I was interested. You've in the past you've employed the concept of the term harm, which I guess is summarized as unjust suffering. And correct me if I'm wrong there.
Yeah.
In what ways might this concept be helpful when pursuing reconciliation? Maybe specifically, if you feel this concept retains force when talking about climate justice and reconciliation through an eco-theological lens, like the harm of creation, so to speak.
Yeah. So now that you talked about climate justice, or I've been talking about it, but now that we kind of moved into climate justice, I just wanted to make note that the book, Making Peace with the Earth, is already out. That was out from last year, 2015, with World Council of Churches. But I have another book coming out in the fall called Planetary Solidarity, co-edited with Dr. Hilda Koster. And that's also dealing with climate justice and gender justice and how we look at church doctrine through the lens of climate justice. So this is an ongoing work for me, and I hope to do more on climate justice. But when we're bringing in the concept of Han is a Korean term. In English, we spell it with spelled as H-A-N, Han. And it's a term, as you said, it's very difficult to translate, but I think the best way might be unjust suffering. So, you know, people suffer, you know, all over the world, but when there are unjust systems, whether it be gender systems that are set up so that there's discrimination against women or discrimination against people of color, those are all unjust systems, or these social systems that are put in place so that the rich get richer and the poor get poorer, and there's more and more of the poor than there are the rich. These are unjust systems that are set up, and then there is this unjust suffering because of these systems that are set up to cause suffering. So, you know, with racial discrimination, you know, people of color are discriminated against, stereotyped, there's prejudice, you know, job loss or there isn't the security or less pay, et cetera, et cetera. Now, as we move to climate change, you know, we think, you know, people keep thinking the earth is going to replenish itself. It's not going to replenish itself. If human beings died off, then it can flourish. Actually, the earth will be bountiful without us human beings. So even right now, as we are seeing, yesterday with all that rainfall, it shouldn't have been pouring rain. Like, it wasn't just spitting, it was pouring rain all day. That should not be happening. When we think about the earth kind of crying out, I also think of this as Han. When we experience Han, this unjust suffering, there's a lot of pain in us, and we cry out in pain as human beings, or as collective people, as women we cry out, or as people of color we cry out. The earth is crying out. And we need to hear the earth cry out. When the climate is getting warmer and warmer, people are going to be displaced. There's going to be many places now where we can't inhabit, and where people are already living, they're going to lose homes. With too much rain and the icebergs melting, people are not going to be able to live on the islands, or the coastal people won't be able to live. There's going to be so much damage to the earth, and the earth is crying out right now. This is the pain of the earth, the Han, and we're not listening. It's very clear to some of us who are working in this area, but to those people who aren't sure, or just kind of not, just denying that this is actually happening, they can't understand. So this is very kind of urgent, I think. And for me, working on these various areas of reconciliation, where climate justice is one of those areas, in a few years, we're going to look at everything through climate change, because it's going to affect everything. It affects the poor people more, it affects women more. People around the world are more people of color. So just all this interconnectedness. So if we don't heed this kind of crying of the earth right now, I think it is going to be more and more damage. We need to speak out more about it, tell our government officials, tell Trump, tell the leaders that are making these changes that we need to do something about it. We have to stop digging. We have to use renewable energy. There's so many other things that we can do to help save the earth. So this is just one thing. And as Christians, we should be even more kind of in the feeling of urgency, because we understand this as to be God's creation, and we understand that we are to be stewards of the earth. We are to take care of the earth, not damage it or dominate over it. So this is a very, very urgent matter.
Yeah, thank you. Yes, thank you for drawing that out and leaning in on it so emphatically for us, and spelling out the urgent implications of it all. I appreciate that a lot. So you've edited a volume to be released in March, along with Jane Aldridge Clanton, Intercultural Ministry, Hope for a Changing World. I've pre-ordered my copy, and I'm very excited about it.
Thank you. You are great.
That's all right.
And I hope this video comes out before the book, so people can still pre-order or order it after the book is released.
Exactly. But whatever it is, there'll be some info in the below section. Have a look for that. Okay. So the book talks about moving church beyond diversity toward interconnectedness and transformation. And in the summary, it notes the well-known Martin Luther King Jr. observation that Sunday at 11 a.m. is the most segregated time in America, an observation that seems to maintain accuracy today, and I would say is very accurate for our Australian context as well. What excites you about this upcoming work, this volume, and what role do you think intercultural ministry can play in the broader pursuit of reconciliation?
Oh, that's another great question too. All the stuff that I've been kind of mulling over for the last few years, because I think as a theologian, we sometimes forget about the church. We're so kind of thinking among ourselves as theologians, and we don't see how our theology affects the people in the church, the pews, etc. And I've been doing a lot of preaching around my area or elsewhere. I've never been to Australia, but anyway, as I preach, understanding that a lot of these churches are either all white, or there's Asian churches, they're all Asian, or there'll be black churches, all black. And, there is really nothing wrong with that. I think sometimes we Asians need to get together, and a time of worship is an excellent time to get to know each other. But then, I'm not saying let's get rid of these ethnic churches or different churches. But then there are those people who are seeking a more kind of intercultural community. Maybe there's mixed marriages or adoptions happening, or, we are now living in a globalized world. People are migrating. We have refugees coming. People for work are traveling. So when diversity happens in our workplace, in our neighborhoods and community, we need that to happen also in our churches. And when it does happen, we shouldn't be so scared. I know as an Asian, North American kind of theologian and attending a lot of Asian churches, we get a little afraid when people of different ethnicities come, or a white person comes. We don't know how to kind of welcome them or how to make them feel part of the community. And we really need to make that happen, because intermarriages are happening. Just so much interracial things are happening in the community. It really needs to happen in the church. And when it happens, we shouldn't be afraid of it happening. We should actually embrace it, because that is the body of Christ. We are not just white people or Black people or Asian or Hispanic people. We are all people, and we need to be able to kind of worship together, to pray together, to be able to share communion, etc. So many of the contributors in the book have either been engaged in intercultural ministry or are engaged right now in intercultural ministry, and they are sharing their wisdom of how this can be done, because we know more and more churches are going to be like this. I'm considered like 1.5 generation kind of Korean immigrant. Many of my friends are getting married to other cultures, and they are starting to leave the Korean churches. Where are they going to go? They need to find a place where they feel welcome. So I think this is kind of how we have to move in the future, and then my generation's children will be probably not going to the Korean churches. So we need to find a place where people will feel welcome, that they can participate, that they can kind of give back to the community. So this is a very exciting project. And, there aren't that many books right now on intercultural ministry. So I'm sure there'll be more and more coming up in the future of how this can be done, how this is a lived out reality. And it's not just this racial thing, but I think sexual kind of differences, sexuality differences, and just even how we deal with interfaith dialogue when there are these people kind of wondering how their faith fits in. So I think it kind of covers all this scope of how then we do this intercultural ministry. So it's a very exciting thing. I think this is part of the work of the reconciliation. And I hope, Duke is considering whether to give this book out for their Summer Institute. I think it'll be a great opportunity for people to read it, to understand that this intercultural ministry is not separate from reconciliation. It's all part of this work of reconciliation.
Yes, thank you for that. That's really good. I'm really excited to read it.
Thank you. We can talk about it more next time.
Yeah, definitely. I was just reading Intercultural Hermeneutics by Henning Rogeman, and it'd be really nice to now see a bit of that kind of thought, but in the practice and the lived experience of churches in various.
And there's a lot of theology. There are theologians writing in the book too, so some theological aspect, etc. So really practical aspects, and then the theological understanding too.
Oh, great, fantastic. So. Reconciliation processes often begin in the wake of or in response caused by societal power imbalances, usually because one group has had a lot of power, misused it, and now we're seeking to reconcile because of a change. And even reconciliation in more intimate family settings is often an attempt to mend such imbalances. However, the problem can be that imbalances such as these persist during the process. Again, I think you see in the Australian context where the Indigenous people felt that, we didn't really have the political clout or the space at the table to really influence and sway how reconciliation went. It was pretty much a top-down kind of process. How do we go about the work of reconciliation in these situations, either on that more national level or the more intimate level, in a way that doesn't miss the continuation of these imbalances?
Yeah, I think the imbalance is evident here in the U.S. It has been a top-down, those in power are still going to hold on to that power and then just say, oh, we're going to do this, and that's how it's been done. So it's very similar to the Australian context. I think there needs to be, because I feel always marginalized, either as a woman or as an Asian American woman, I feel marginalized. And when I think about marginality, I think of, if there's a big circle, then those are in the margins are kind of pushed aside. And so this marginality, it's very difficult. And so I reflect on it theologically too. If we continue to push people on the margins, so those who we have oppressed, who we need to reconcile, we kind of continue to push them in the margins, there is really no power. It's going to be the white male that are in the center, and they're going to tell us how this reconciliation works. So then as I think about this marginality in the center, I think of an image of decentering. And so how decentering would work is, so if I was in a classroom, I would draw like multiple circles. So we would have multiple circles everywhere. So this decentering, so there isn't this one big circle, but a decentering. And people all kind of belong to these different circles. And then so the power is kind of distributed power. That's what I'm hoping for. And when we are able to distribute power, then we get to start to be empowering one another. And I think that then is a helpful way to do this work of reconciliation, that we kind of, those who hold power, we're not, we're kind of multiple people. So in one way we may have power, but then another way we don't. So I would say Black men may not have as much power as a white man, but they may have more power over Black women. So there are these differences. So that if we have these multiple centers, then we start to empower one another. And then if we empower and we're all kind of in this equal playing field, then we can kind of be open to each other's conversation, kind of hear each other's pain. And those who have oppressed can kind of open up and listen to the real damage that has happened. And I think then we can kind of begin this journey of reconciliation. It's a long process. It's not going to just happen overnight. And it's not just one individual against another. It's communities. It's a huge group of people against another group. And so it's going to take years, but I think just because it's an enormous task doesn't mean we just sit back and say we're not going to do it and give up. We still kind of tackle this issue and try to work towards this reconciliation.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And I think that's it. It comes all across a lot of the talk we've had. It's a big issue. It's a hard issue, but it's if we're not doing this, then what are we doing? So I think that's really good. So one final question, though, knowing my questions, there's probably about 20 questions within it. So you're writing another book you've got coming out, and we didn't even mention that you've got a book with one of our previous guests, Graham Hill, coming out on reconciliation.
Yeah, that'll probably come out next year. I don't know if it'll come out this year, but anyway, we're working on it now. Yeah, your friend, our fellow Australian.
There you go. Maybe that'll be the final in time we'll get you out here to our fine shores.
That would be great. Yeah, never been there. My daughter was just talking about Australia yesterday. She says, you've never been there. They hold conferences? And I said, yeah. It goes, how come you're not invited? Because I must say, my daughter and I are actually co-writing a book.
Oh, wow, cool.
Yeah, it's going to come out this year too, and it's called Mother, Daughter, Speak. Because I was saying, now you're going to be an author too, and then that's when the Australia topic came up, because she said, do they hold conferences?
Yeah. Where would I like to go? And
She's like, how come they don't invite you? So that's another book that'll be coming out. Yeah, Mother, Daughter, Speak. So with my 15-year-old daughter, Elizabeth Lee.
Oh,
so we've been working on it for many, many years, and finally. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. We'll keep an eye out for that one. And the final book that we're keeping an eye out for is the Homebrewed Christianity Guide to the Spirit, Hand Raisers Han and the Holy Ghost. So this is part of the Homebrewed 10-book intro guide to theology, and this will be out, I think, toward the end of the year. Now, in our first interview, we talked about the way the Spirit is often ignored or misunderstood, at least in comparison to the other two members of the Trinity. And so I'm curious about two things. One, what's it like and what excites you about writing a book for the Homebrewed series? Because I'm sure that's a slightly different thing in and of itself. And as someone who's written a lot about the Spirit, a lot of awesome stuff about the Spirit, How do you think a rich and full understanding of the Spirit fosters the work of reconciliation?
Okay, so I think Trip Fuller is an amazing, amazing person. I think him and you, I don't know if you've met in person. I think you've interviewed him, right?
He's going to be part of our Jesus
Okay.
1224 thing, yeah.
Okay, so yeah, he's this really very interesting, kind of very imaginative. I think similar lines like you're very kind of innovative, etc. So that's how he is too. So for him to do this podcast, which is the most listened to podcast in the world on theology, etc., is amazing work. He's a great interviewer, just like you. He has this kind of quirky perspective to theology. So that's why it's kind of interesting, because you have to write it very like funny, in a funny way. And I think in person I'm funny, but when it comes to writing, I may not be. So that it's been very hard to write in that kind of mode. So it's a very big challenge for me, but it's exciting because it is really for the people to understand. So, a lot of my work has been very academic. I'm trying to write less academic work because I feel like the people in the church, in the pews, and then those who don't even come to church, it should be very accessible to them. That's why I do the blogging. I do the shorter pieces of writing so that it'll reach out to the masses. I think that's very important to me as a theologian, that, my work affects people in the classroom and the academy, but also out in the wider culture. And then I think the Holy Spirit, the subtitle, not of the Homebrewed, but of the Embracing the Other, is a transformative spirit of love. I think this work of reconciliation can't be done without the help of the Spirit. I think it really is the Spirit. I know I talk about love, the eros that really kind of changes us, empowers us, and gives us this power to kind of work towards love, work towards embracing each other, especially those who we call the foreigner, the stranger, or those who we are so afraid of. So I think without the Spirit, none of this work can be done. So I'm really hoping that more and more people, I think as Protestants, unless you're in the Pentecostal tradition or the holiness tradition, we don't focus so much on the Spirit. So me being a PCUSA ordained minister, we don't focus so much on the Spirit. So I'm hoping that there'll be this renewal of the Spirit. I think that's going to be the movement of the future, this movement of the Spirit. I think theologians will start writing more on the Spirit and less on Christology. So I think we can't do this work of reconciliation without the Spirit.
There you go. And if that is the trend, if people are going towards pneumatology, away from Christology, then get in now so you can say, I was reading about the Spirit before it was cool.
Or I was writing it before it was cool.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Reading or writing,
Exactly.
Thank you. That's excellent.
Well, Grace Jisung Kim, thank you so much for joining us today. People have been watching, we've listed a whole lot of books, so get on Amazon or Book Depository, make your wish list, get your pre-orders happening, and then review 5 stars once you've read them.
That's very important. Yeah, rate it 5.
Yeah, of course, 5.
Just rate it any number, but a 5 will be good.
Any number? No, it's a 5 or nothing. Don't show up with a 4. That's ridiculous. Grace, anything else you'd like to plug or make?
I think you're going to be a dad soon.
Yes, that'll be getting very
congratulations.
Thank you.
This is very, very exciting. It's like when I write a book, it's giving birth to a baby. Wow, that's super exciting. So congratulations.
No, it is very good, and we're having a girl, and so I'm very excited. The work you are doing is very appreciated.
Then it's not up on Amazon, but you should get your wife my book, Mother-Daughter Speak.
There you go.
That's a good gift. Mother-daughter book.
There you go. All right, I'll make it happen. I'll be right next.
It's not up on Amazon yet, but in a few weeks it'll probably be up there for pre-order.
Great, awesome. I'll put that on put that in a reminder in my calendar.
Yeah.
We'll put it in the go bag for the hospital, so she has something to read.
Oh yes. I think it should be with every chaplain.
Yeah.
Tell all the chaplains to give it to all the new mothers.
All right. I got a mission. I got some work to do. I've got it happening for you. Well, that is fantastic. And I'm sure everyone's going to appreciate this interview, and people can reach out and see your work on your blog and buy your books, and that would be a good.
Thank you so much for having me.
No worries. Thank you for joining us. And remember to check out the Duke Summer Institute for Reconciliation in June. Just Google it and you'll find it. Grace is one of the many fine people they have got in attendance. So check that out. Grace, thank you very much.
Thank you so much.